Yeah, Sabri and Mutiminka na enye adibia mwa. Ite twam ne ye bibi maya abosam na kutekwan bi so agye enu nyama fie nsem na odomfo efen Mawu no enam nando no so epese sade ba enim bio nti nei kasa me kasa no nyina ye prof kasa. Actually, I'm here today basically not for anything that much anyway, but I'm here to talk on behalf of our brothers, and we've been, taking advantage of the Caucasian for decades, for years, for thousands of years, and now we have more or less been tagged as savage and more or less useless. Whereas we own this whole universe until around 6,000 years ago, the Caucasian resurfaced. So in that sense, how come we end up owning the whole universe, now have become the minority in terms of population? So mainly they kill us every day. So I'm here to talk about it. Mawu, the creator of the whole universe, has given me the audacity here to talk about what is going on in the whole universe, but to tell the world, because now there's so-called reparation going on that the black people are seeking reparations from the white people. But my question here is, how can we seek reparations from the visitors who have visited our land or our home? How can a citizen seek reparation from a foreigner? So that means we've lost all that we have to the foreigners, and now we are going back to them to seek for reparations. So the mother of the whole universe, called Mawu, is telling me to talk about what is going on. Mawu, I'm here to talk about the message you told me to tell the world, which is very simple. And the topic is very simple, that we the black people can forgive, but we cannot forget. We can forgive you whatever you've done against us. We can forgive you, but we cannot forget. Why can't we forget? How can we forget? Whereas the first man who made car in this whole universe, called Charles Rich Peterson, his name, Charles Rich Peterson, in Ohio, Springfield, owned his own automobile company for 12 years. Now, Ford bought one, and he dismantled it and fixed it back, and now he rather owned the first guy who manufactured car in the whole universe. Whereas Charles Rich Peterson in Ohio did that around the 17th century. And how come the Jewish also landed in the United States, which is 1864, 68, and now own everything? Whereas we the black folks own everything have become beggars. How can we forget? Whereas we formed the first 13 state, it was all black state, and now we don't own any of them. How can we forget that? And how can we forget, whereas we had our own president, 1 up to 8, 1, 2, 3 up to 8. The 8th one is John Hanson. And we end up becoming nobody is the president. And recently they created one, which is of Obama being the 45th president. And now they tag him to be the first president of black people. Whereas we had the first 8th president before even the so-called founding father, George Washington. How can we forget that? And how can we forget we invented aeroplane and flew into the air? Can't forget that. And how can we forget we made the washing machine? Now we don't own them. Can't forget that. And how can we forget we made a camera to snap pictures, and now we don't own it anymore? Can't forget that. And how can we forget we made the first people who invented machine to sew a shoe? Now we don't own it anymore. And how can we forget we own millions of land all over in America, and now we don't have them anymore? And how can we forget that around 1790 they went to Akebuland, which now they've changed the name to Africa? How can we forget that? And they went to Akebuland, which they've changed the name to Africa, brought some people around the 1790, 91, 92, 93, 94, and create a history by saying they are bringing these people here so that they can rewrite the history to tell the world that the black people who were here were from Africa, which is originally called Akebuland. How can we forget that? And how can we forget when the Europeans came from Europe to this place, we taught them how to live and show them how they can live without any disease. And how can we forget when they came, they call us Indians, which means the indigenous people of the land. And how can we forget when they changed their name from Indians to Black Americans? How can we forget that? And how can we forget when they changed their name from Black Americans to African American? How can we forget that? We cannot forget that. So when you are asking of forgiveness, we can forgive, but we can't forget. How can we forget when we were here on this very earth in millions of years before the Caucasian was created by our own man called Akka, which eventually they changed his name to be Yakub, being the first scientist, experimented on white people as the Caucasians, and now on this world. And how can we forget we've been the origin of the world, been millions of years, now have become the minority of the world? How can we forget that even the China and India combined, the population is more than half of the population, plus the rest of the Caucasians? So looking at it, the blacks might be probably 15 to 20% of the world population. How can we forget that? And how can we forget that the American Medical Institution has created vaccine to inject our children every year so that they can kill them, so that we can reduce our population? How can we forget that? How can we forget, whereas our women, when they go to hospital for labor, almost 50% lose their life. But none of the white people lose their life. How can we forget that? How can we forget when they came here to live with us, they poisoned our altar and to kill millions of us? How can we forget that? And how can we forget that they created missiles to kill us? How can we forget that? And how can we forget that they recently created HIV, which they deposited in New York blood bank to kill our people? How can we forget that they recently created Ebola in Harvard to reduce our population to 25% down? How can we forget that? How can we forget that when they decided to take our land, they tag us as terrorists, and they come to our areas to shoot us down to take our land by force? How can we forget that? And how can we forget our young boys and young guys are walking down the street and they gun us down and nobody is able to talk on our behalf? How can we forget that? And how can I personally forget? I bought Audi 2016 Q5, Audi Q5 2016. I was being chased by police every single day until I sold the car out. How can I forget that? Because I'm a black man. And they asked me, where did I get the money to buy the car? Then I have to let go my 2016 Audi Q5. How can I forget that? How can I forget? Even I personally, about a week and a half ago in New York City, the police just stopped me at the stop sign. He said, oh, the pedestrians were crossing, so I should have been the other side. I said, but there's a way for me to get through. So yeah, but I still have to give you a ticket. How can I forget that? People experience this every single day, unabated. And how do you expect us to forget that? Well, if you guys are requesting for us to forgive you, yes, we have forgiven you guys. But I tell you this, we cannot forget it. There's one thing I want everybody to know. The whole universe, the Caucasians to know. How can we forget that they changed our mother's name, the creator, called Mawu, from all the books and gave us dog, which they changed the name D-O-G and flip it over and make it G-O-D for us to worship as the creator? How can we forget that? How can we forget they brought a pig, forest pig, which is called Jesus, and in English, Jesus, for us to worship? So if we know that, how can we forget that? How can we forget that they forced us to worship or to go into religion at a gunpoint? And now it has become part of our people, and everybody is worshiping dog and pig. How can we forget that? If our mother has called us and tell us all this, how can we forget that? We cannot. So if